Welcome back, everybody. This was one of the chapters that was covered in the previous textbook I used for this class, and I just like it too much to not use this module. So there's no textbook equivalent, but it's a cool topic. We'll talk about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and how they apply to libraries, the International Federation of Library Associations, which is the IFLA, and the work they're doing, some global library statistics, and worldwide digital initiatives. United Nations recognizes libraries as partners in their Sustainable Development Goals, which is really pretty amazing. The SDGs exist to build sustainable societies, so many of the programs and services that we offer in libraries dovetail with those 17 goals. The goals include ideas like no hunger, no poverty, reduced inequalities, climate action, responsible consumption and production. Libraries all over the world empower citizens to improve their knowledge and civic engagement. And the sustainable nature of our whole framework of sharing collections and spaces and technologies speaks to these goals. The IFLA, which is the International Federation of Library Associations, was a participant in creating those Sustainable Development Goals. UNESCO is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and they created the Public Library Manifesto. The manifesto describes how public libraries can help citizens of the world achieve those human rights of freedom and prosperity through access to culture and information. Internet Manifesto, which says that, here's a quote from it, the freedom of access to information and freedom of expression are essential to equality, global understanding, and peace, end quote. So consider how legislation like net neutrality, for example, affects this idea. Without net neutrality, preference can be given to specific resources by internet service providers, limiting that freedom of access to information that the Internet Manifesto charges us with. The most humble of citizens, who maybe shares his story through a blog online somewhere in the world, has less chance of dialogue with others, less chance of reaching a readership that can learn from him, less chance of his learning from them through their comments, all because an internet service provider didn't deem him important enough to share his work widely. The Internet Manifesto says that, and here's another quote, amid the existing digital gap, we think it is crucial to minimize the risk of leaving marginalized voices behind in international processes, and the global library network represents an opportunity to connect not only with people in the library community, but also with the communities that they serve and that often use libraries as their only point of access to reliable information via the internet, end quote. This connects libraries to the global nature of the internet, and it connects the freedom of access to information statement to the library's charge as a place to provide that, and invites libraries to have a seat at the table when considering internet governance, internet as a utility, as we mentioned in the technology module, the digital divide, and information literacy, all which, when address equality, global understanding, and peace. The United Nations 2030 Agenda is linked in the module. The agenda is a plan of actions for how to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. Also linked in the module is this IFLA toolkit that helps libraries advocate for the resources they need to contribute to those goals. It helps libraries to understand the UN 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. It helps them advocate to policymakers, demonstrate library contribution to implementation of the SDGs, and how to share information about the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs. It includes sample letters and briefings, information about utilizing the media, and even suggested library activities to help libraries meet the Sustainable Development Goals. The Library Map of the World is another service of IFLA, and I've linked to it in the module. It's a place where you can get data
and statistics about the number of libraries, libraries with internet access, how many full-time staff they have, volunteers, registered users, physical visits, how many checkouts they have, electronic loans, all kinds of data around the world. Now, the issue with global library statistics is that unless the data is, gathered and reported with some commonality, some, benchmark of consistency from country to country, then it's not always apples to apples. So if one country, calls it something else, or they don't collect the same data the same way and report it the same way, then global library statistics can sometimes be difficult to understand. Library Map of the World does a good job because it's one institution, IFLA, looking at data from around the world. Some more global library standards, the IFLA Public Library Service Guidelines. I've linked to the open access ebook. Helps libraries develop services and collections, basically, libraries all over the world. And then we have this Meeting User Needs in Public Libraries, a checklist for best practice. That's from the IFLA. The resource list covers things like friends groups, focus groups involving staff members and people from the public, statistical analysis, surveys. They have suggestions and comments, schemes. It's a whole, literally a checklist for best practice. So many of these things are more like a global take on something sort of like Project Outcome. They don't necessarily emphasize outcomes like Project Outcome does, but their toolkits are more generic for global scale use. The same general idea, though, on standards and data analysis. A couple of global digital initiatives, the Beyond Access Project. IREX is the International Research and Exchanges Board. They are interested in modernizing libraries, increasing digital inclusion, and increasing access to information around the world. And then EIFL, the Electronic Information for Libraries, is a consortium, and they help libraries work with information access issues. Sorry, that's it from this lecture. I'm interested to hear from you all. Have you been to libraries in other countries? How were they similar? How were they different than in the US? Did anything in this lecture surprise you? Have you heard of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Library Manifesto and all of that? I really kind of like this topic because it widens our view of what libraries are globally. So that's it for this week. Have a good week, everybody.